Hello, and welcome to a scene and music that should be familiar to most people. Some people haven't played the game yet, but yeah. Super Metroid. Easily one of the three best video games ever made, in my opinion, up there with Final Fantasy VII and Ocarina of Time. But wait a minute, I already did a playthrough of this game. And I attempted many playthroughs of the Super Metroid Link to the Past crossover randomizer combining the two games. But that was obviously made for speedrunners, or at least people who are better at bomb jumping and wall jumping than I am, so yeah. But no, this is actually a follow-up to my NES video I made earlier today. My second favorite console, or well actually nowadays that would be the Switch, but up there is one of my favorite consoles, the Super Nintendo. And looking at some of its games that I used to play a lot of back in the day. In this case, the day being the early 90s, just after it was released. Well, actually, to be honest, I didn't get one until early 92 when the Zelda game for it was released. I mean, come on, it was a Zelda game. Of course I was going to get one, but yeah. The fact that you couldn't play your NES cartridges on it because the cartridges were different sized, you know, the fact that you couldn't play your NES games on it too, along with the new games they were making for the new system. Well, screw that. I'm not buying it then. You know. Yeah, and some of these advanced techniques they show on the demo here, I'll be danged if I can do them. I mean, makes me feel like an idiot. I've been playing this game so many times between Super Nintendo cartridges, PC emulation, 3DS Virtual Console, Switch NES, or Super Nintendo Online. One way or the other, I've played this game so many times over the near 28 years that it's existed. But anyways, yeah, my favorite Super Nintendo game and one of my favorite games of all time. But I've already done a full playthrough of this game, so let's move on to another Super Nintendo classic. Yeah, other Super Nintendo classics. Like the one that sold the system for me. After how much I loved the first two, there was no way I wasn't going to buy the third game, and the console needed to play it, of course. I wasn't a fan of that. To this day, I'm not. How very few consoles, at least in my experience, are ever backwards compatible. You always need to, yeah, keep the old console to play the old games, and the new console to play the new games. And after a while, you need a freaking entertainment center just for all your consoles, a massive jungle of cords to plug them all in, and watch like AVGN videos as he tries to hook up the new console to play the game. Like, what was that? The Atari 5200 video, I think it was. Yeah. You need a dedicated gaming room, which I don't have room for, so yeah. That's what I like about like 3DS with the Virtual Console or Switch, what they're trying to do with the NES and SNES Online. I mean, I wish they'd just bring back the traditional Virtual Console of the Wii, the Wii U, and the 3DS, but anyways, this isn't about modern gaming consoles. The Super Nintendo, while it wasn't backwards compatible with the NES, still had a lot of great games on its own, like this one. Of course, my file isn't here. Yeah, I'm currently doing a playthrough of this game on my channel. I already recorded all the videos. It's just a matter of uploading them. One more video to go to complete the series. then on to the next Zelda game, whatever it might be. But anyways, more about that later. I mean, at this point, also thinking about uploading the Castlevania Aria of Sorrow playthrough I recorded earlier, or maybe doing another Metroid game like Zero Mission, remake of the first game, or Metroid 2. I haven't decided yet what game I'm gonna upload once I'm done with this one. But anyways, that's another topic for another time. Right now it's Super Nintendo tribute. The point of this video, again, a follow-up to the NES one I did earlier today. But anyways, yeah, I'm in the process of doing a complete playthrough of this game, so on to another SNES game. I mean, this is the one that sold the system for me. But of course, this one was a launch title for the Super Nintendo when it released in America in August of 1991. And I want to clear up a little discrepancy. I might actually, and it is as I thought. I spoke incorrectly a little bit when I did my last month when I did my Mario retrospective video in regards to this game and the Super Nintendo launch. No, we didn't have the Super Nintendo. A friend we knew did, and I used to go to his house and play this game there. Until, April of '92, when A Link to the Past came out. That's when we got our first SNES, Super Nintendo. And it just, for games like this, I was over at his house playing it so much, it might as well, it was like it was our own console. Or some of the times he'd come over and bring it with him. But no, yeah. I was wrong when I said we had our first NES by October of '91. He did. We didn't. Again, it just seemed like it was wrong of me to think that way, but yeah, I played it so many times and he didn't care. But yeah, I just wanted to correct that little blunder there. I mean, the whole point of those retrospective was my memories of my experiences with those games as they came out, and then I go and get it wrong. So, I mean, I liked this game and definitely wanted to get the console and play it. But like I said earlier, the fact that it wasn't backwards compatible with my NES games, like, screw it. Then he went and got one because he likes this game a lot too, and didn't mind the fact that it wasn't backwards compatible. He didn't mind that as much, so. Anyways. Oh, did it freeze up? Oh no, there it goes, okay. Of course, like I said in my Mario retrospective video, this is my favorite of the early Mario games. And amongst the traditional platformer type Mario, this would be my would be my second favorite behind only Mario Odyssey on the Switch. Of course, if you throw in the RPG-esque Mario games, then it would be, then Superstar Saga, 3DS remake of the Game Boy Advance original would be in that mix too. As would Paper Jam and Dream Team, two of the other three 3DS Mario RPG games. Little in-game tips there. Damn, that's a big bullet. Holy crap, that thing is like 10 times bigger than me. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, never mind. I didn't want to do that. Okay, stop spinning. There you go. Oh, that. Oh, come on. Really? Can I even jump? Good thing this isn't a real playthrough right now. Oh, it's one of those. Okay. Nah, never mind. Again, this isn't a full playthrough anyway. Again, sometime I will do a playthrough of these games, but for now... Yeah, another one of my favorite SNES games. Yeah. Although the friend I was talking about, although he's no longer around, but sadly miss him from time to time. But yeah, life goes on. He loved this game a lot more than I do, enough to buy this Super Nintendo just to play it. Yeah. For me, that was A Link to the Past. A few months later, but. Anyways, there were other good games on the SNES, so let's move on. Sim City. Another one of the launch titles, or at least... Alright. I'm back. Of course, video was paused, so didn't seem like I went anywhere, but yeah. As I was saying before the break, another one of the early, if not launch titles for the Super Nintendo. There's that music that's somewhat similar to a town theme in Final Fantasy V. Okay, what? There it goes. Like 1,000 different maps to choose from. Load times. Even back then, they could be an issue. Name of your city. Hastings is in Minnesota, town where I was born in. Spent good majority of my early years. Yeah. Yeah. An okay chill game. Just build a city, watch it grow, manage it, pollution and traffic issues, and yeah. Fun game, but since this particular version has never been re-released on any kind of virtual console or, yeah. I mean, there's PC versions that are more advanced, but for nostalgia purposes, I like this one. Yeah. Anyways, not much to say about this. Good game if you like this kind of thing. But, yeah. Then there's this game. I played this game a couple times in '92. I mean, it was a Final Fantasy game. Of course, I was going to try it. But to this day, like I've said in many videos before, I'm not a huge fan to say the least. I mean, it does have a good soundtrack, and a minimal story. This is when stories started to get a little bit more advanced in games, at least in RPG games. But overall, the fact that you get the same party members every time with no chance to really customize or optimize them other than what equipment you put on them. And some of them are kind of useless in my opinion. All add to a rather negative gameplay experience in my opinion, so yeah. I like the games like Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 5, Dragon Warrior 3, where you can choose your party from the beginning and maybe even customize them as you go. But of course, this game, as everybody knows by now, was labeled Final Fantasy II to avoid confusion since the real 2 and 3 weren't released here, but it's really Final Fantasy IV. But yeah, everybody either already knows the story there, or there's enough videos on it, so I don't have to go into a lot of detail on it. Just point being, it was mislabeled Final Fantasy II in North America. Flashback over. Of course, later, some of the later remakes of this game would have voice acting in this sequence, but I don't think they had much for voice acting on the Super Nintendo, other than that intro to Super Metroid. The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace. That's amongst the few examples of voice acting in the Super Nintendo era that I can think of right offhand, anyways. Of course, this version is drastically dumbed down, as people would point out. Cecil doesn't have any of his Dark Knight abilities. And again, this was when RPGs still, they were selling moderately well, so to speak, but they weren't exactly, best sellers for a console or best sellers for a single year, or, they were never on par with Mario or Zelda games for sales. So this was, that period where they started to think that they had to make RPGs easier for American audiences. Yeah. Again, I might someday do a playthrough of this game after all of the other Final Fantasy games I like are done. Baron Castle, one of the better themes of the series, for that matter, not just this game. And again, that's one thing I do give this game credit for. It has an awesome soundtrack. But music alone does not make a good game. It helps, but what are you gonna do? Play the game just so you can hear the music? Yeah. Anyways, moving on. Oh shoot, I forgot to pause it. So sorry about that. I thought I paused the video as I was trying to find this game. The infamously bad, so to speak, depending on who you talk to, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Well, it's definitely a dumbed down RPG, entry level for beginners, you know. Squaresoft's way of thinking at the time was RPGs aren't doing so well success wise. Americans need to be coaxed into RPGs, basically put. Enter this game. Overly simplified RPG. And historically, we can look back and laugh, you know, because obviously this didn't work. You know, the Mario crossover RPG 7 Stars didn't really work either because, well, it was an interesting, you know, it was a Mario game, so of course it was going to sell well just because of the title character being in the game. But it didn't really do much to interest people in RPGs overall. So it wasn't until Final Fantasy VII. Anyways, yeah. Yeah, this is another game I used to play a lot of back in, you know, throughout the 90s. Haven't really played it much since then, but another one of those games added to the extra long, ever-growing list of games I'll do a playthrough of sometime. Now, his default name is supposed to be Benjamin, although like the many of the Dragon Quest games, I don't know where people get that. I mean, yeah, I know in Dragon Quest games it's been explained to me a multitude of times. It's from reviewer copies, but I mean, again, I just don't know why they don't put them in the games themselves. But anyways, yeah, I've been over that. But yeah, been over that topic many a time. Ben. Ben Kenobi. Yeah. Of course, one thing that most people agree on, you know, the game is extremely easy, at least for the most part, but it does have a really good soundtrack. I mean, even some of the harshest critics of the gameplay have admitted that they like the soundtrack, so. Focus Tower. Yeah, of course, basic early RPGs, crystals representing the elements earth, fire, wind, water, like the first Final Fantasy game, or the fourth one, or second, Final Fantasy 2. Yeah, the Japanese Final Fantasy 3, Japanese, Final Fantasy, yeah. So many of the early Final Fantasy games revive crystals of the elements to save the world. Very basic, generic story. I mean, Final Fantasy IV did have that aspect, but yeah, they did a good job, and somewhat good job for an early '90s game, evolving past just that. Character relationships within the party, and yeah. Anyways, oddly enough, this can be one of the more annoying battles of the game because it's purely random. You don't have any special abilities or attack yet, so you just attack, hope that you hit, and he doesn't get a double, what do they call that? Critical or whatever, or that you don't miss. As long as none of those happen, you should win the battle, but if either of those do, yeah. So it is very possible that you could lose this battle. Yeah. Again, I'll go over more of the dialogue here when I do a full playthrough of the game. Right now, it's not, that ain't the idea of this video, to focus too heavily on any one game, but the, vast library of Super Nintendo games that I used to play a ton of throughout the 90s, and in some regards still go back to and play today, to this day. But yeah, the overworld exploration is replaced with a follow the yellow brick road kind of system, where you can only go in the directions of the highlighted arrows. Right now I can't go anywhere since I haven't advanced the story through, so incredibly linear as far as overworld exploration goes, which is a strike against the game that I can wholeheartedly agree with. I mean, granted, a lot of early RPGs were kind of linear as far as story progression, but at least you can explore the overworld to some extent. Of course, I've mentioned this before in other playthroughs in regards to NPCs that get in the way. Yeah, one feature I love about this game, you can jump over them. Granted, it's not very realistic that he can jump that high, but very convenient for gameplay. Receive tree wither. Okay. Now, theoretically, since these chests like this respawn every time you leave the screen and come back, you could just leave, come back in, get this over and over again. Which, yeah. Yeah, see, now that I've done that, I can go right. Still can't go up yet. So yeah, it's very linear as far as progression goes. I guess they were thinking, because people could easily get lost in exploring the world map in an RPG game, so we'll overly simplify that too. I mean, yeah, no doubt about it, this game, at least for the most part, is a lot easier than other RPGs. But I don't, I mean, it can be a problem, but, it said so right in the back of the box art, or the front of the box art, entry-level RPG. They made no mystery about it. It wasn't billed as a super complex game, that only RPG experts could get into. It was billed as an entry-level RPG for beginners right from the start. So what's the surprise? I guess maybe people didn't see the box art or something. I don't know, but customize scale figure. Yeah, that's better. Anyways, I'll go into more detail about the mechanics of the game as well whenever I do get around to doing a full playthrough of this game. Again, just for now, just a brief recap of some of the Super Nintendo games I always played. And that pretty much covers this one for now. I mean, you get one secondary party member that, unless you do a ton of grinding, like I always do in RPGs, that should be obvious by now. Mr. Over Leveled, that's me, proud of it. But anyways, yeah. Unless, you know, you do a lot of grinding and get over leveled, the secondary party members are going to be a little higher level than you are when they first join, because they're meant to just help you through your adventure. And unfortunately, you can't get too attached to the character story-wise, because as the game progresses, they leave and are replaced by somebody else. So yeah, it's another one of those type games. So if you like RPGs where you can build some kind of connection to the party members, then you're not going to care too much for this game. Because you usually only have each secondary party member for like one dungeon or maybe one area surrounding that dungeon, then they move on and are replaced by somebody else. So. Anyways, yeah. Now this time remember to pause the video. Sorry about that between the last. I could have swore I paused the video, but I have to make a note of that in the comments when I post this on YouTube to skip ahead to such a time. But anyway, yeah. Tecmo, the Ninja Gaiden series, the football series, Tecmo Super Bowl, Tecmo Bowl, or in this case, one of their few RPGs that I can think of. Of course, this one is a more obscure title that most people have never played, and the few people that have don't really think too highly of it. So, like Mystic Quest, this is another one where I'm kind of the oddball out in my liking the game, or so it would seem. But this is one that I was given to me as a Christmas gift in '95. I want to say '96, somewhere around about there. Since one of my friends knew I was a big RPG fan, they saw this one on sale somewhere. Yeah. So from that point on, I'd spend a lot of the '90s playing and replaying this game. Secret of the Stars. Well, you're going to see that in a moment when the title card goes up. It's a pretty good RPG game. I mean, there's a lot more grinding involved because you got two separate parties that you got to grind up to decent levels for late game, and always switching between them, which adds for some interesting puzzle scenarios. But because there's even more grinding, it's a turnoff for a lot of people. And I can kind of see that again. Grinding isn't for everyone because you're fighting the same enemies over and over again. And I can see, again, I can see the dislike for grinding. But, yeah, in those early days, it was a lot more mandatory. And in this game, especially, since, again, there's two different parties to grind up. And money to buy weapons and armor for two different parties. So, yeah. But if you could get past that, pretty good soundtrack in my opinion as well. But yeah, this is one of the few RPGs I can think of in the early mid 90s that wasn't made by Square or Enix, either half of today's Square Enix. Yeah, most RPGs back then was made or seemed to have been made by one or the other. The two big RPG giants who are today a half of the same company. Kind of fitting that they would merge into one company since they were both so big in RPG games on their own. But yeah, one of the few games not made by them. I mean, there's probably a lot more that I'm not even aware of to this day. It's not like I know of every Super Nintendo game. I mean, somebody that has played more or done more research into Super Nintendo games could probably name a truckload of RPGs that weren't made by either Square or Enix. Anyways, yeah, as I was also going to say, good game, but some of the names are questionable. Not in a controversial standpoint, but like Like one of the towns is actually called Bee Gees. No kidding. Bee Gees, as in the 70s disco group. Staying Alive? Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to sing because my singing voice sucks and I'd scare away viewers instead of bringing them in, but... And the main villain is Hun Cruz, however you pronounce his name, so yeah. Some of the weirdest names for characters and places I've ever seen in an RPG game, but again, once you can get around that... And again, another one of those games that I will do a playthrough of eventually. So many games, so little time, once again. But yeah. I've always liked this game. At least since 1995. 95. I don't know when it came out. I'd actually have to look that up. Okay. Came out in 93 in Japan. 1995 in America. So, yeah. So yeah, I got it later that same year, so it wasn't all... So actually, it wasn't all that old. According to the Wikipedia article on the game, it was only like, you know, it came out in July of 95, so it was only like a half a year old when I got my copy of it, so yeah. It wasn't all that old after all. I was thinking it came out in like 93 or 94, you know, like when Secret of Mana and Breath of Fire, well actually Breath of Fire was 94 too. I mean, there were so many good RPG games on the Super Nintendo. You know, it was the early years of RPGs, at least for American gamers. There was a lot of them on the NES, but there was even more of them, more good RPG games, I think, on the SNES. Yes. Anyways, Squaresoft. Yeah, back to them again. I mean, whereas Enix was pretty much only known for its Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior series. For the most part, you know, prior to merging with Squaresoft. Squaresoft was everywhere in RPGs. This series, Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger. Would say Breath of Fire, but no, that was Capcom. Plus, like I've said in other videos, at least unlike Enix, Square didn't give up on North American gamers. Oh, we're not selling well here. Let's just close our American offices and, you know, Dragon Quest 5 and 6 don't get released here. Yeah. Square, on the other hand, was right there plugging away at it with gems like this one, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 6, and eventually Final Fantasy 7. So yeah. Of course, this game, as it turns out, nobody really knew it at the time, unless you had connections to Japanese media, which might have been possible because the internet was around by this point. Just was dial-up and, yeah. Multiple people you know, if you had multiple computers in the house, you know, you can only have one person online at a time. And if anybody wanted to use the phone, they had to get offline because it occupied the phone line to be online. And all that just to watch music videos that look like slideshow presentations. So yeah, the internet existed by this point, but it was extremely primitive by today's standards. Definitely didn't have broadband or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or anything like that. So and I doubt there was a whole lot of video game related websites yet at that point either. So yeah, point being, history of the internet aside, I don't think too many people at the time knew that this was actually the second part of a series started by what we called Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy. Seiken Desetsu, something like that. I don't know how you pronounce that. The Mana series, as it's called in America. This was actually the second game but it's seemingly the more popular one that everybody to this day still remembers if they have any knowledge of it at all. And it's another one of those Super Nintendo games that I played a ton of back in the day. And heck, I even play it sometimes on the Switch since it's on the Collection of Mana, Final Fantasy Adventure, this game, and Trials of Mana, the third game in the series that, up until its inclusion on said Collection of Mana, was never released in North America, at least not in the Super Nintendo original form. Yeah, kind of like that they did that. Now, too bad they can't do that with Dragon Quest V and 6 and Final Fantasy. Yeah. Bring some of those other unreleased, to this day, unreleased games here officially outside of PC emulation. But anyways, yeah. Of course, this is another game with some really good soundtrack tunes. Yeah, of course, the Mana series, or Seiken Densetsu in Japan, I think still goes on to this day. I think. I mean, there's newer games. There's like one game on the PS1 that's also remastered for the Switch that I'm thinking of getting, like I said in the stream chat room last night. So, yeah. Yeah. Trials of Mana 95, Legends of Mana 99, Sword of Mana 2003. Yeah, looking at the Wikipedia article on the series. Okay, so Echoes of Mana, the newest game in the series. The rest of them lately are all remakes and remasters and collections. So I was right, the series is still kind of going on to this day. Of course, by the way, there's also Dragon Quest V, Dragon Quest VI, Final Fantasy V, but those games weren't released in that form to this day. Well, Final Fantasy V was eventually, yes, but Dragon Quest V and 6 never were to this day, so all we got of those two games were remakes. So, while I could mention those games, they wouldn't fit the idea of this video since I didn't start playing them until later systems and later remakes or PC emulation. Why is it not? Okay. Kind of stiff controls here. I don't know if it's my controller or if it's... may not be able to see it on screen, but I'm really having to mash buttons to get it to move. Of course, it's like that. No, now that I think about it, it's like that on the Switch Collection of Mana too. Now that I think about it, you really have to mash the button to get it to stop. Either get it to move or get it to stop. Get the character to stop moving. or to change directions. You know my name, good for you. Ah, okay, this is getting annoying. Yes, I'm working on it. Trying to battle sticky controller. Not working too well. Again, you might not be able to tell watching the video, but yeah. Really having to mash buttons. And again, something about this game, have that same problem on the Switch. Collection of mana. Bright light, bright light. Yeah, no wonder they have to have epilepsy warnings on every game these days. Which is a good thing, you know. People can get, you know, yeah. Oh yeah. Action RPG, my introduction to that kind of RPG. To this day, I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, I do like this game. More recently, Tales of Vesperia. Play a lot of the definitive edition of that game on Switch. Ever Oasis on 3DS. So yeah. Do like some action RPG games, although I prefer the more turn-based, classic turn-based of early Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Mario and Luigi RPG games. Of course, that works both ways. You know, there's a lot of RPG fans who prefer the action RPGs that don't really have the patience for turn-based. So, yeah. Like anything else, it's a matter of personal opinions and perspectives. So, keep slashing through these weeds, thinking there's going to be something there. I don't know why. But anyways. Yet another game I could possibly do a playthrough of sometime in the next year or two. Yeah. One of the better games on the Super Nintendo, and certainly one of the games I played a lot. Granted, I haven't played it much since then, but anyways, moving on. Of course, as long as I'm talking about RPGs or Super Nintendo games in general that were never released here in North America, yeah. Dragon Warrior 1 and 2 remakes for the SNES. Too bad we never got these. As again, I guess this was I guess by the time they remade these games for the Super Nintendo, RE1 Square, figuratively speaking, flipped the middle finger to North America. I mean, that's not, you know, I'm sure that wasn't their intention or what they. It just comes off that way. Oh yeah, they're not selling well, so we're not even going to release them here. Screw the Americans. They're not buying our game. Yeah. And now it's Roto. It was Loto in the Game Boy game. Game Boy Color remake of the same game was Loto. Yeah, I guess, you know, the infamous L and R mix-up that you hear about in Japanese translation commentaries. Like Gradius, yeah. The evil King Dragon. Of course, this is a fan translation since this game again was never official. This version of the game was never officially released here. So, but yeah, I'm just mentioning this as a passing thought. Granted, I never played this game at the time, so it doesn't fit the bill of the rest of the games in this video. I mean, to this day, I've never played this particular version of the game for that matter, but yeah, even if I had, it wouldn't have been until emulation. Since it was never released here, there's no other way to play it here. Sorry, Square Enix, but yeah, you don't want people emulating your games, well then release them here. Duh. Anyway, so yeah, this doesn't fit the bill of this video, but you know, being the big Dragon Quest fan I've always been, I had to at least mention these, along with 5 and 6. As for playthroughs of these games, that it's either these versions of the game or the Game Boy Color remakes, one or the two, maybe both eventually, but I mean, how many different versions of the same game can I do playthroughs of? I mean, yeah, I don't know. For these ones, I'm not going to make any, ironclad plans to do so, but I might get around to it. Anyways, on to the next game. Yeah. Capcom. Mega Man. Monster Hunter. Breath of Fire. One of 2 games in this series on the SNES, with part 3 being on the Sony PlayStation. And I haven't played any of the games since 3, so I don't know what consoles are. Yeah. Of course, these days, if I play this game, it's going to be on my 3DS Virtual Console, since both of the Super Nintendo games 1 and 2 are on there. They're also on the Switch Super Nintendo Online package if you have the membership for that. Of course, this game has a rather lengthy, for the time, intro sequence, so probably not even going to get into any actual gameplay on this one, at least not until whenever I can get around to doing a playthrough of it, sometime in the next 5 years. So many games, so little time. Phrase I've used several times in this video, but each and every one of these games I've shown briefly in my NES video and now this one. Each and every one of them I plan on, except for maybe these SNES remakes of Dragon Warrior 1 and 2, but other than that, every one of these games I plan to do a playthrough of at some point in time, but yeah. Yet another RPG classic for the Super Nintendo. And a lot of them were either made by, distributed by, or assisted by, with help from Squaresoft or Enix. So, yeah. I mean, this one, as you saw in the intro, Square helped with, but it was pretty much Capcom that made the game. Okay, I guess I will be, controlling my character a little bit, little gameplay, or not. Yeah, there's so many good RPGs on the Super Nintendo. Surprising to me, looking back at it, that none of them had the appeal that Final Fantasy VII ultimately did. And popularizing the entire genre. I mean, some of them were moderate sellers in North America, sure, but it wasn't until, yeah. This guy looks like Agnem from behind. Agnem from A Link to the Past from behind. I mean, yeah. Okay. Oh, excuse me. Of course, there's also Chrono Trigger, Illusion of Gaia, uh, Secret of Evermore, a lot of other RPG or RPG-esque games on Super Nintendo. Yeah. Far more RPGs than there were on the NES. So for a person like me who was just really starting to get into RPGs in the early 90s, the Super Nintendo was a great console. Sarah? Huh. I work with somebody named Sarah. Of course, she spells her name with an H at the end, so dark dragons are outside the village. Uh-oh, we're toast. Dragons are gonna breathe their fire and barbecue us all. Yeah. Anyway, this video isn't too heavily show one game when there's so many of them to talk about on the Super Nintendo. So, and last one, a game that seems to be much more popular these days than it ever was back then, coming out in June of 1995 in North America. Earthbound, or Mother 2. Yeah. I mean, I played it back then, but even then, no, very few people seem to care about it. Again, one of those games that seems to be more popular these days than it ever was at the time. So, yeah. To be honest, I only played this once when it came out, shortly after it came out, but remember very little about it. Even though I have it on my 3DS Virtual Console. As soon as they started putting Super Nintendo games on it, Super Metroid, of course, was the first one, obviously. A Link to the Past, the second one. Super Mario World. And then some of the RPG games like Breath of Fire 2, this game. The Super Nintendo games that I've always liked since back then when they came out in North America. Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3, which I'm not going to show here because I'm running out of time. Both in terms of video time and the fact that it's almost time to go to work, so yeah. Real life calls, so to speak. But yeah. Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3. Super Mario Kart series made its debut on the Super Nintendo. Racing games like Top Gear 2. Tecmo Super Bowl for sports games. So many good games on the SNES. In fact, thinking about it, I might actually stand corrected. I mean, in my Nintendo video, NES video, and even in the title for that video, I said that the NES is my favorite console based on how many good games there were for it. Thinking about that, I don't know, the Super Nintendo might actually rival that. Or at least come really close to it. So yeah. Anyways, another great console. Primitive by today's standards, sure. Again, I would hope so. 31 years after its initial launch in August of '91. I would hope it's primitive by today's standards 3 decades later. If not, there's something wrong with technology here. If something 30 years old is still state of the art. Yeah. Great console for its time, and so many of its games are timeless classics, not just to me, but talk to anybody, almost anybody. I mean, yeah, sure, I'm sure there'll be some people that hate the SNES, never liked any of its games, but I have yet to meet such a person, either personally, face-to-face, or over the internet on Twitch or YouTube. I have yet to meet a person who never ever got into any Super Nintendo game, not even one of them, so... Anyways, that'll about do it for this video. As always, thanks for watching, and this will be the last video like this I do, since, there wasn't a whole lot, wasn't a whole lot of Sony PlayStation games I ever really got into other than Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, and for a short time span, Breath of Fire 3. But yeah, PS2 likewise, Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, Final Fantasy X. So, I mean, if I do another one of these videos, it'll probably be Sony PlayStation 1 and 2 combined. But probably not, though. Yeah, I know. I've always been more of a Nintendo fan anyways. I mean, like I said before, the only reason I even bought a PlayStation was for Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy series had always been a Nintendo exclusive up until then. I mean, think about it. I mean, I mentioned this in other videos, but yeah. Up until the point 7 was released, Final Fantasy games had always either been on the NES, the Game Boy, or the Super Nintendo for North American gamers. 7 comes out on the Sony PlayStation. First time there's a Final Fantasy game on a system that isn't a Nintendo one. So, yeah. And I ultimately, obviously, did buy a PlayStation to play that game, but Metal Gear Solid, one of the other PS1 games I played a lot of back then. Also, either the NES or the Game Boy Color for Ghost Babel, which actually came out after Metal Gear Solid, so that's kind of nullified, but that doesn't really fit the point here. See, another game whose only, another series was pretty much a Nintendo exclusive up to that point. So yeah, I've always been a very big Nintendo fan. To this day, the only two devices I own are the Switch and the 3DS, both Nintendo, so yeah. I'm definitely what you could call a Nintendo fan boy, but hey, it was Nintendo that got me into gaming. Well, Pac-Man did, but like I've said before, I kind of gave up on gaming because Pac-Man was only arcade. And if not for the NES, I don't know if I doubt very much I care about games today, but I mean, there's always that alternate reality thing. Oh, you would have found some other, you would have got into video games somehow, some way, sometime, blah, blah, blah. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, Could make for interesting conversations, but the problem with that kind of thing is you'll never know because it didn't work out that way, so you'll never know how different things could have been. Which is why I usually try to stay away from that kind of conversation. It's all just theoretical and But with the way it did play out, yeah, highly unlikely that I'd even care about video games today if not for Nintendo and the NES, and then following it up with the Super Nintendo. Anyways, now I bid you a farewell, and as always, thanks for watching. See ya.